thoughts and the use of the sacred word. Now, that word use is a very interesting word. I would say thoughts and the introduction of the sacred word. It's a gentler process. Take a good look at this. Do you see that feather coming onto the cotton? That's the gentleness. That's the gentleness that needs to be there in the practice. I remember Father Thomas saying, it's not an idea of trying to hit the thoughts out of the ballpark, It's a gentle letting go. And when it loses that gentleness and it becomes like a determined effort, then listen who's in control. The beauty of it is we're asking the Holy Spirit to dance with us, to teach us the new steps that we need to learn. And so it's a gentle process within the prayer itself. So when engaged with your thoughts, return ever so gently to your sacred word. Now, I'd like you to know that in the beginning, guideline 3, as you know, the 3 Trappist monks were the ones actually that worked to develop this tradition, taking it from the fruits of the Cloud of Unknowing and other writings, as LJ had mentioned. In the process of forming these simple guidelines, if you would, originally this was when aware of your thoughts, return ever so gently to your sacred word. And what happened actually was that what was happening was that when engaged with your thoughts, and they had when aware of your thoughts, you're always aware. In the prayer, there's a certain level of awareness that something's going on sort of in the back of your mind. It seems to be always there. And people were returning to the sacred word too often. In fact, they would find actually their centering prayer period was just filled with saying their sacred word over and over again. Now, in the beginning, that could be true because you're sensitive to your thoughts, you hang on to your thoughts, and so you react to your thoughts. But here it says not aware, but engaged, which means you get on to your train of thought. You become a passenger. It begins to kind of like possess you, if you would, that you find yourself, oh my goodness, I've been thinking about something all along, did not realize it. Well, good. When you realize it, that you have been engaged with your thought, whatever that might be, you return ever so gently to your sacred word. So aware and engaged. Engaged means when you get onto the train of thought. Aware is that you just realize that there's a train passing by. Notice this, thoughts is an umbrella term. When I see this umbrella, it reminds me of a story of Thomas's, because in his book, Open Mind, Open Heart, which is really the Bible of centering prayer and his classic work, and I hope all of you have had a chance to read it, or if you're new at this, I invite you to go to it and read it. It's just a marvelous work of his. But he uses this umbrella story, as I interpret it, is sometimes the thoughts are coming like you're caught in a rainstorm, okay? So what he said was that you have to just finally say, I guess I'm just going to get all wet. And someone said to me, well, I hate getting wet. And I said, well, put the umbrella up, which is your sacred word, which allows those thoughts to drip off the umbrella rather than dripping off of you. But there are times really when these thoughts just come at you, and sometimes they're very persistent. Here in Florida, the storms that come are just unbelievable, how much rain can fall in 5 minutes, but then it passes quickly. So thoughts are an umbrella term of body sensations, sense perceptions, feelings, images, memories, plans, reflections, concepts, commentaries, and even as LJ said, spiritual experiences. So what is the guideline? When you become engaged, ever so gently, return to your sacred word. Well, you might say to me, "Oh my gosh, it's everything." Yeah, everything that engages you, you let go of. Well, why do I want to let go of it? Because you want to have a conversion from American cheese to Swiss cheese. We need some holes in us to allow the Spirit to breathe fresh air into our activity so that we might become more of in the image of our God, of image of Christ. So it leaves an opening. So whatever it may be, it's good. This is almost something I would love you to memorize and remind yourself. Thoughts, and remember, that's an umbrella term of all the different things that were mentioned on the last slide, are inevitable. Now, for thoughts not to be inevitable, you would have to be brain dead. Now, I think sometimes people might say to you, I think you are brain dead. But the point is, your brain will always be functioning and there'll always be activity. So they'll be inevitable. They're integral because that's what you're letting go of. Just developing a spirit of detachment, of Teflon. Whatever comes up, you let go. Remember the direction in the prayer. Whatever comes up is going out, unless you decide to form a little committee about what's going on there. But whatever is coming up is going out. They're an integral part. So there is no such thing as saying, I don't want any thoughts. They're here, and they're an opportunity to make an act of love to God. I will let go of these thoughts in order just to be more present to you, resting in you. And they're normal. Thoughts are the normal pattern of all us human beings, and that's the beauty of it all. Now, I love this slide. Look at all the characters that you can have and the thoughts that you might be having during your centering prayer. Now, for God's sakes, don't start analyzing. Well, let me see. During the centering prayer period, I had some insights, but I wasn't attracted to something, or I never self-reflected, but I was wandering about. Don't start analyzing it. These are just examples of what could be the type of thoughts that you might be having. So the ordinary wanderings of the imagination, if you would, by thinking of things that were going on before you began your prayer, things that you have to do after the prayer time is over. It could be all of a sudden something that took place that you found that was very pleasing and the memory of that comes back. It could be something that wasn't too pleasing and you feel an aversion towards that. It could be a wonderful insight, about how to resolve a difficulty. I have a wonderful story about that. A friend of mine in Seattle was into brains, the dreams, reminiscing about what goes on in his dreams. And he had the habit while he was sleeping even of having a little pad next to his table. How he did this, I don't know, but next to his bed. And he would write down what he got, the insight he got while he was dreaming, and then look at that when it was all over. Well, when he began centering prayer, he still had this habit. If something good popped up into his mind, he would write it down on a little piece of paper next to him. Now, I hope you believe that God has a sense of humor, because I believe it, okay? And one time during prayer time, all of a sudden he has this insight on how to feed the poor. And so he wrote down the thought that he got at that particular time. And when he finished his prayer, he anxiously picked up the piece of paper to read what it said. This is a true story. This is a true story, this friend told me. It said Xerox donuts. Xerox donuts. And that was a lesson to him. Let the thoughts go, for goodness sake. Self-reflection. How am I doing? I did better the last time. Something mustn't be happening right. I should be doing better. I've been doing centering prayer since 1975. I'm 85 years old. There's always some stuff that comes up. But self-reflection, you don't mark your own papers. That's what I say to people. You know, the teacher marks your paper. And there's sometimes during the centering prayer period, there's all sorts of stuff going on. But when you start saying, how did I do? I should do better preparation, or I make sure I don't have these insights. You let them come. Thoughts and feelings arising from the unconscious. Well, in a certain sense, there's all this type of stuff that goes on in our unconscious. And the point is actually sometimes you might be in the prayer and wonder, where did that come from? What did that have to do with me? And so on. Please don't spend any time analyzing. Let it come up and let it go. You know, if you're used to getting a massage, you know, when they're working on you, they don't, and you don't tell them what to do. You know, you let them work and feel what's going on, and you just let them come and you let them go. So there's all sorts of these opportunities of making love and saying, Lord, I want to be more attentive on my intention of resting in your presence and action and not in my own agenda. My favorite 4 R's in the beginning, as we were creating centering prayer conferences back in 1980s and 90s, these were the 4 R's that were so helpful. Resist no thoughts. Retain no thoughts. React emotionally to no thoughts. Return ever so gently to your sacred word. So I invite you to pause a moment and look at the screen. And just in a certain sense within yourself, read slowly those 4 R's. Resist no thought. You notice I made it plural, but we'll say with the singular. Resist no thought. Retain no thought. React emotionally to no thought. Return ever so gently to the sacred word. Let them come, let them go. Let them come, let them go. Each return to our sacred word is a prayer and an act of love. I'd like to read this little statement to you. In centering prayer, both thoughts and silence have an important role to play. Some thoughts contain what needs to be healed and forgiven, and silence creates a space for the healing to take place. Let me repeat that. In centering prayer, both thoughts and silence have an important role to play. Some thoughts contain what needs to be healed, and the silence creates a space for that healing to take place. Important concept to think about. Centering prayer is a method, not a technique. Let me read something to you about that. The meaning of technique is the ability to apply a procedure or to follow rules so as to expect a desired result. Centering prayer is not considered a technique because there is no direct cause and effect relationship. We are developing a relationship of faith and trust, not based on any specific goal or expectation. It's a relationship. And in any relationship worth its salt, there's a time to talk. There's a time to work things out. There's a time to express affection. And there needs to be a time simply with the one you love, resting in their presence. I leave that up to your own experience. Time to talk, time to work things out, time to express affection, and a time simply to rest in the presence of the one you love. That's the different levels of prayer. Vocal prayer, meditation, affective prayer, contemplation. And centering prayer is the contemplation aspect of just resting in the presence of the one you love, because this is a relationship. So I get an amen? So during the prayer time, we don't analyze our experience. We don't harbor any expectations. We're not aiming at any specific goal. We're simply resting in the presence of the one we love. The image that I have brought as I try to explain this to people through the years and from my own experience, I have a great fondness of the image of Christ washing the feet of his disciples. And so sometimes when people are trying to struggle with what exactly is happening while I'm there, I say you're simply sitting, allowing the Spirit to wash your feet. During the prayer time, we avoid analyzing our experience, harboring any expectations, or aiming at any specific goal, other than desiring to consent to God's presence and action in our lives. So we're deepening our faith. We're deepening our faith. And faith is really trust. Trusting in God's work in our lives. We do not judge our periods of centering prayer as good or bad. They are simply there. And we go without a desire really to rate ourselves or judge what's going on. We trust that in those 20 minutes, in the consenting, God will do whatever needs to be done in our lives. It's a leap of faith. And centering prayer is not dependent on a felt presence of God, but on a deepening of faith in God's abiding presence. So in summary, Consent to God's presence in action. That's what we're doing. Consenting. Saying yes to God's presence and action in our life that is already there. Return ever so gently to the sacred word. Notice the gentleness that is there. The key word is ever so gently, not trying to force anything. You let them come, you let them go. Because thoughts are inevitable, integral, and normal part of our prayer time. They're our friends in many ways because they carry with that whatever needs to be healed or forgiven in our lives. And so the main mantra, if you would, is you let them come and you let them go. You let them come, you let them go. You let them come and you let them go. Consent is the heart and soul of centering prayer. Let them come, let them go. A minimum of effort is the only activity to letting them go. Resist no thoughts, retain no thoughts, react emotionally to no thoughts, return ever so gently to the sacred word. And so, like these boats resting in the power of the lake that they're on, we rest in the presence of God in our life during this period of time. It's fascinating, the simplicity of the 4 guidelines of centering prayer. Choose the sacred word as the sign and symbol of our desire to consent to God's presence in action. The power of that word or symbol as a sign of consent. Sitting comfortably, ever so gently returning to our sacred word. In the sitting of comfort, we're presenting to God our whole being. And we're saying to our God, do whatever needs to be done from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet. Go wherever you need to go, Holy Spirit, to do whatever needs to be done, that I might be more in your image and likeness. The spirit of detachment for those 20 minutes, just letting go of everything except your desire to consent to God's presence in action. And that last guideline, rest for a few minutes after the prayer time, remain in silence. Nobody follows it. Nobody follows it. I wrote an article about this, about, the forgotten guideline. It says rest for a minute or two, Now, did you ever time how long 1 minute is? I mean, it's like an eternity when you have a lot of things that you need to do. I remember once giving a retreat and I said to them, no one follows that 4th guideline. This was an 8-day retreat. And then after the prayer period was 30 minutes, 2 30-minute periods, I noticed nobody was moving because I always sit for 2 or 3 minutes. And I began to realize, having said that, they were afraid to move, for goodness sakes, because I said, you have to sit a little longer. So even before, when we finish our experience of centering prayer, we're going to sit quietly at the end of it after the bell rings for a minute or 2. And I think I might even time it just for sure and let you know what it means to sit quietly for a few minutes. We're going to go into centering prayer now. I'm going to start with reading the guidelines word for word because I really think they're a way of life, but that's another conference. Number one, choose a sacred word as a symbol of your intention to consent to God's presence and God's action in your life. So whatever you have chosen in your first centering prayer period, for people who are new at this, either repeat that word, or if you want to use another one, but whatever you do, please keep to that one word, that one phrase, that whatever it may be, through the duration of the 20 minutes. The second, sitting comfortably with eyes closed, settle briefly. And you notice what LJ said, the biggest thing is your back being as straight as it can be. And silently introduce the sacred word as a symbol of your consent to God's presence and action within. 3, as LJ said, this is the guts of centering prayer. When engaged with your thoughts, notice, when engaged with your thoughts, return ever so gently to the sacred word. And at the end of the prayer period, remain in silence with eyes closed a couple of minutes. I choked up on that one. A couple of minutes. Okay. Okay, this is from Lynn. When life is very challenging, I find that I am least able to sit and center. Paradoxically, this is when I need centering prayer the most. Any thoughts or suggestions? Yes, the wisdom of St. Ignatius of Loyola, the Jesuit, founder of the Jesuits, he says, when that happens, you need it even more. So sit yourself down and go through the rainstorm of not really wanting to be there, and the fruitfulness of that practice at that particular time will manifest itself. So that is my suggestion. I mean, when you least want to do it is when you should do it, because the fruitfulness of that at that particular time will manifest itself. And I know in my own existence, my own life, that's been true. If you begin putting it off because somehow or other life is too challenging, then life's going to beat the living daylights out of you, to be very honest with you, because you know this is your little reservoir that you can go to in order to touch base with what the center of your being really wants, and that is to truly have a deeper relationship with God. So Lynn, I hope that helps. Donald, when you sit seems to change and become dry for a time. Is there anything you can do to stop the dryness? No. You have to wait for the next rainstorm, if you would, to soften a hard pan. Dryness is dryness. I've been praying this prayer since 1975, and when I start trying to bring it to a panel to try to analyze why the dryness there, I just don't really feel like doing this and doing that. I've kind of let go of that, and I know I'm talking about years of experience. It doesn't matter. It's like the weather. I'm alive. I know it's not all about me. I know in a certain sense that this is an opportunity to, in a certain sense, just be at a deeper level. And that's what I just, once again, consent to God's presence and action in my life. It's not fatalistic. It's just the awareness, really, that this is part of the life inside of me and my emotions and feelings that I need to deal with and not be swayed from my good intentions because I'm not in the mood at this particular time. Listen, for years I was in marriage and family life, stuff about being in the mood, and that doesn't help the relationship many times. It gets a little more deeper than that. If my prayer time is interrupted, can I go back to it? Oh, David, of course, of course. look at poor LJ, for goodness sakes. He committed himself months ago to this workshop in person in June. And when we finally decided to Zoom it, along comes his child's birthday party. And if you notice, he answered his questions inside his car while he was driving. So I hope his wife was driving and he was in the back seat. But sure, you begin again. You just begin again. Let's be honest, God's work is in interruptions of our life. Father, you're doing a great job. All your words are well received. Thank you, Martha. Gail Peters, thanks so much for the reminder about the fourth guideline. So helpful, even after 22 years of centering. Well, did you notice? I mean, how did it feel? I mean, that was genuine, 120, 120 seconds, and how long it felt. But see, the beauty of it is to allow whatever has processed to become deeper within ourselves, seriously, and not rush right out. I always feel that if people rush right out, and there's different circumstances, rush right out in a certain sense. What are they rushing to? I mean, what are we rushing to? There's a time to allow it to settle. I call it the lingering after the prayer time, and allowing the reservoir of silence to grow, so that when I go out to do what I needed to rush out to do, there'll be more of God's presence in me rather than Carla Rico. When I'm thinking, when the energy's coming from Carla Rico's desire, if you would, or need, it's just going to be all about Carla Rico. But if I this is my own thought, and if I rested and allowed that presence to go deeper within myself, then I bring more of him, or however you want to express God, more of the divine presence in what I'm all about. I had a little experience a number of years ago when I was on a 4-day hermitage experience, and the thought came to mind at that particular time: to be and not to do, so that in my doing there is more of the being. To do, to be, and not to do for a period of time, so that in my doing there'll be more of the being. And that's meant a lot to me, that little insight. So allow it to percolate. I used to go to Weight Watchers, and Smart Ones was what I used to take in order to eat properly. That's their prepared food. And I always remember taking it out of the microwave. It said, allow it to sit for 2 minutes before opening the microwave meal. And I started to laugh to myself. I said, no wonder I'm half-baked, because I never allow it to simmer and go deeper just because it's done. So, for whatever that's worth. Paula, when I introduce and return to the sacred word, I listen to the word born on a very low note, a tone that sounds like chanting. This sound is very restful to me. Is this a violation of the prohibition or on a imagery? Oh goodness! Remember what LJ said. They're just guidelines. They're just guidelines. I would only say to you, that's fine, please. But again, I just ask you to consider this. Why do you need the sound of chanting? The sound is very restful to me. And I know it is. But why do you need it? Why do you hold on to it? You know? To use an example, in giving a centering prayer, a silent retreat, I remember going to this retreat house, and during the meals, they play music. I said, this is a silent retreat. Well, the music helps us not hear the commotion that's going on in the kitchen. Well, if it's real life, I should be able to let go of the commotion that's in the kitchen, you know? Because the growth is inside of me. What does it profit a person to go on retreat and not hear a sound and not change themselves, you know? This is just me, okay? This is just me. But please, whatever you're doing, you're consenting to God's presence and action. But just ask yourself, why do I need that sound to make me feel restful? Because that's not the restfulness we're talking about. We're talking about the restfulness of God working, getting to a deeper level inside of you. There's a song I always like, all of me, why not take all of me? Can't you see I'm no good without you? You took the part that once was my heart, so why not take all of me? You know, I just think about it, that's all. I see. When you were answering questions earlier, you mentioned Thomas. Were you referring to Thomas Merton or did you know him? Thank you. I was referring to Thomas Keating. Did I know Thomas Merton? No. When I was a young kid in 1950, myself and a buddy, we were sophomores in high school, took the Greyhound bus, the train, and a taxi cab to Gethsemane to be with Thomas Merton because, notice, 1950, I was third year high school, second year high school, because we had read Seven Story Mountain and were so touched by it. And all we saw was his back as he was going into conference, into chapel for the office. But it was kind of funny. Both of us were deeply touched with the concept of Thomas Merton and the Trappist and contemplative life. And I have to laugh that I didn't get one Tom, I got another Tom, who I met in 1969, and Merton died in 1968. So in a certain sense, the baton was passed. Just a little side story. Let's see what other questions we have. I'm the new center corrector. Oh, congratulations. I met you briefly when you were here last. Thank you for a wonderful service to benefit from an event I served during a time of transition. And if you have ever available to talk, it would be nice to, it would mean, sure, we'll make that happen. Just get in touch. Just get in touch with me. You can call the office and they'll tell you how to get me.
Do you want to elaborate a little bit on your relationship with Father Keating? Because you've mentioned him several times.
Oh, wow. Yes. Well, I was ordained a priest in 1960. And in 1969, I'm 85 years old. And so if I babbled a little bit, it's because, you know, whatever. And so 1969, some priest friends of mine were going up to St. Joseph's Abbey in Spencer to do a retreat up there. And the retreat actually would go from Monday to Friday. And mostly it was participating in the life of the community. Well, I met Father Thomas Keating in '69 at a distance. Remember, he told you the story as an abbot, you know, at a distance. And so I kept going every year with these priest friends of mine. 1975, Meninger says it was 74. Meninger gave the retreat and taught us centering prayer. It was the first retreat Father Meninger ever gave at the monastery, teaching people centering prayer. He called it the prayer of unknowing, because Father Thomas Keating had encouraged Father Basil Pennington and Meninger and himself to seek out a way in which we could experience that fourth dimension, if you would, of the contemplative prayer, in a simple format. And as you know, the prayer came from the Cloud of Unknowing and other writing. And by the way, everyone, I hope you have a copy of the Method of Centering Prayer. If you don't have it, you can go to the Contemplative Outreach website and print up a copy. It's in about 12 different languages, for goodness sake. And if I always give that pamphlet to anyone who has any questions about centering prayer, because that little leaflet, the Method of Centering Prayer, covers everything conceivable that you want to think about. It's a gold mine. So please make sure you have it. If you don't have it, please get it, okay? Because you can download it from the website. So 1960, so when we talked with Father Meninger in 75, we came back and the four priests decided to get together once a month to support one another in that practice. I know I'm getting around to it in a long way, but by the way, that group that started with some variations of membership, that group that started in 1975 meets monthly to this day, supporting one another in centering prayer and living in the present moment. But 1978, Father Thomas Keating had a workshop on those of us who were giving centering prayer workshops. He was having a presenter's training program. At the end of the presenter's training program, he said to us, and there was about 14 of us at the monastery, and he said, I would appreciate a critique on the workshop. Now, Myers-Briggs, I'm an ENTJ. So he got a 7-page critique on the workshop, pluses, minuses, and suggestions for improvement. Therein, our relationship began. And so what happened actually was we kept in touch. During that time, he left Spencer and went to Snowmass. He retired as the abbot and then went to Snowmass. When he was thinking of doing the first intensive retreat in Lama, 1983, he invited me. And I said to him, actually, that there was someone who was also a meditator, and that was Gail Fitzpatrick Hopler. And then David Furnett, Mary Mrzowski, and we went on this retreat in 1983 up into outside of Taos at a place called Lama. And as a result of that retreat, that was the foundation of the beginning of contemplative outreach. And it also happened that Pat Johnson was serving at Lama and served us on that retreat. And in 1983, the seeds were planted for contemplative outreach. 1984, a meeting took place, and this is all with Thomas Keating. A meeting took place in New York City, the apartment of Gus Reiniger and Ed Bettner, and the incorporation of contemplative outreach took place. And from that time on, Thomas was the president, I was the vice president, and continued to be the vice president until 4 years ago. And in the middle of that, then Mary Mrzowski became part of it. And then Gail Fitzpatrick Hopler became the executive director, and for a while she was the president, and she left about 4 years. You know, it's a wonderful feeling, and all this is with Thomas. And we had the wonderful experience with Thomas because his family was in New York, and I lived in Bayonne. And so whenever he came into town for a board meeting at St. Walburger's, a Benedictine place, he would always say to us, shall we go over to New York? And so I knew Thomas in the relationship, not only for him being a spiritual father for me, but I also knew him as a brother of knowing his family and the things he liked about New York, because he was raised in New York. And there was that intimate side that I think existed throughout the years. So someone asked me recently, what was the most profound thing that Father Thomas ever said to you? And I have to laugh because it was at Lama when we went on the retreat for 15-day centering prayer retreat, where he gave the talks that are now the spiritual journey talks. And the funny thing about it was that everybody in this group could do centering prayer in a yoga position. So I couldn't do that, but I got this little prayer bench that you rest the back of your butt on so that you can be on the floor praying. Well, after about the third day, this 15-day retreat, I was in pain, absolute pain, but I wasn't going to give up. Everybody was on the floor. I was going to be on the floor for this meditation. So I go in to see Father Thomas. He looks at me after I speak for a few moments and he says, why don't you sit on a chair? So I said, well, no, nobody else is sitting on a chair. So God's calling you to sit on a chair. Yeah, but what are they going to think? You know, I'm a priest. I should be, you know, I mean, sit on a chair. So much embarrassment, the next centering prayer period, I get a chair and I put it where my thing was, my, whatever you call that little prayer bench. Total embarrassment, humiliation, filled with my pride and everything else. I went through those three 20-minute periods with a walk in between. And God forbid if you walked, because that was a sign of weakness, because if you could really pray, you know, you should be sitting there for the full time, all that sort of stuff. And mortified. The next sit, 5 people joined me, sitting on their chairs.
There you go.
And the lesson that I learned, be yourself. God loves you the way you are. You don't have to be like others. You just be yourself.
Thank you, Father.
Thank you, Father.
You're welcome.
All right, so we're ready for that 4th conference when you are.
Okay, let me take a sip of water here. Have we lost everyone on that story? I don't know.
No, we're all here.
Oh, we're all here. Okay. I just want to tell one other thing. That was the beginning. And the end was when he was dying up at Spencer. And I was with Thomas. And we visited him. Gail came up and visited him also because Gail could not go to Denver or to Snowmass because of the heights after a while. So he was so pleased to see her and see me, as he was of so many wonderful people that visited him during those final months. But one of the joys was that I said to him, Father Thomas, can I pray over you the prayer that we prayed over my dad while he was dying? And he said, yes. And so I did. It's the Bannerman prayer, you know, the one we prayed at his memorial service, talked about his memorial service. And When I finished praying, he says, "Can I have a copy?" And I said, "Yes." And when I came back the second time and last time, I heard from the monks that he was asking the monks to pray that prayer with him. And it meant so much to me that it was the prayer that tucked my dad into God's arms, and it turned out to be a prayer that was part of his prayers to tuck himself into God's arms. And I'll end our conference with that prayer at the end of our workshop. Okay. Now, I love this. It's deepening our relationship with God. It's conference number 4. Look at the woods. Look at that pathway. It's not paved. There's a few rocks there. When I looked at this artwork, I thought to myself of Robert Frost's, 2 paths in the woods, and I chose the one least traveled on. And I don't want to say it in an elitist way, but when you enter into contemplative prayer, you're moving yourself, not that others can. Pope Francis has said so many people can be contemplative through the ordinary prayers of their everyday life and their ordinary practices, okay? But this idea that we have a little discipline that opens us to a relationship gives us an opportunity to walk paths that are not really walked by others. Doesn't make us special, doesn't say anything in contradiction. But this happened to come our way, this opportunity of a way to living that rest of the story. We read, we reflect, we respond, and we rest in God's presence. And some friends of mine were kidding me about, they thought, you're going around, you sound like Paul Harvey. If you remember Paul Harvey, the radio guy, he would talk for 15 minutes, and then he would say, "After the commercial, let us come back and tell you the rest of the story." And then he would give you these facts, and it would make you see things in a larger way. So it's given us a chance to maybe see things with new eyes. And so we are on a new path, and maybe not that traveled by others, but this is where we happen to be. All right. Now, prayer is a relationship. Please keep that in mind. I'll be honest with you. When Father Thomas first began sharing with us at the Lama retreat about the opening talks of the spiritual journey, part of that was he was saying, prayer is a relationship. And I don't know why. Here I was, maybe 30 years old. No, more than that. It was in '84. Well, whatever it was, 20 years a priest. I never thought of prayer in the terms of prayer as a relationship. And so this was a whole new wonderful insight. Now here it says there's obstacles. Well, one of the obstacles that we have is the fact that we think we're separated from God. Now we struggle with that in our lives. There's sometimes we think there is separation, and sometimes we think there's no separation. Sometimes we think we have to do everything ourselves. Sometimes we throw ourselves on the mercy of God. Sometimes we do it for a reward in future life, and sometimes we do it for just experiencing God's presence at this present time. So there's different cultural attitudes that we bring to our prayer. And also too, because we live in the past many times in our journey, we're filled with anger or guilt that took place in the past, and a fear about what the future is going to be like. And also to a little bit of unworthiness, Now, this is not the negative, but that's the stuff of the human condition that we deal with. Our attitudes culturally, and all these, it says psychological feelings, but also these mindsets that we have really that are there and can be blocks to the flow of the Spirit of God's grace working in our life as we consent to God's presence and God's action in our lives. Father Thomas said, our basic core of goodness is our true self. Its center of gravity is God. The embracing of our basic goodness is a quantum leap in the spiritual journey. A quantum leap. So if a person in a certain sense hasn't embraced their basic goodness, and it has nothing to do with their behavior or their beliefs or anything, to realize actually that we're all the children of God and the basic goodness is there, and our center of gravity is God, because if we exist, God is sustaining us in this existence. To wrap your brain around that as you continue on the journey is such an important point. We see in Genesis, so God created humankind in God's image. In the divine image, God created them, male and female. He created them. God saw everything that God had made, and indeed it was very, very good. Yes, there's goodness. There's goodness. And St. Paul says, everything God created is good. So wrapping this around, you know, when I give retreats, sometimes I'll say to people, you know, embrace our basic goodness. All of us have basic goodness in us that wants to burst out, you know, and take over our whole being, you know. Even those people are basically good for goodness. And you see people look at me and say, oh, that can't be those people. Yes, basic goodness is a part of our lives. And that's something we embrace in our lives. So it's an important aspect to keep in mind. And notice in a certain sense how that helps allay the fears and the guilt and also the feeling of unworthiness and whatever goes on. And it's not a you know, like a dream. It's what we believe in our Christian tradition and world religion. So there's a basic goodness that's there that will manifest itself more and more in time. Never let turn your back on anyone. As a priest all these years, 60 years, I've seen it happen when you can encourage people and love them for the goodness that's there, even though you can't see a darn thing. Long run, it pays off. So reducing the obstacles to the relationship is returning to the sacred word allows the Spirit to reduce the obstacles. Please remember that. And by now, whatever is coming up is going out. Don't try to analyze it or worry about it. If after the prayer time there's something you need to look into it. But allow it to come, allow it to go, whatever it might be. It's not only what needs to be healed, it's not only what needs to be forgiven, but it also needs what needs to be celebrated in our lives. We don't celebrate enough all the good stuff that's going on in our life, even right now. As I'm talking to you, if all of a sudden I got sick right now, got an attack right now, there are angels ready to come to take care of me right now, to bring me where I need to go right now. There's loved ones that we cared about, what's going on right now. We don't celebrate, in a certain sense, this larger picture that's there. Do I get an amen? I can't hear you, but do I get an amen? I mean that. I mean that. One of the greatest lessons that I know I get preachy, but that's one of the greatest lessons actually that I learned was in the second grade. Some of you heard me tell this story. When I was in the second grade, my teacher, Mrs. Schoner, I still remember, you know, went to the blackboard and put a little chalk mark on the blackboard and said to us second graders, you know, there is actually very important that little black mark, the chalk mark. She said, what do you see? What do you see? And every one of us said, the chalk mark, the chalk mark. Doesn't anyone see the blackboard? Doesn't anyone see the blackboard? I never forgot that. No matter what's going on in our lives, no matter what, in returning to the sacred word, allowing the Spirit to reduce the obstacles, okay, in our life, we become more and more aware of the fact, actually, that there's something bigger than us going on. and how we're supported in so many ways that we don't feel appreciated. We don't appreciate as much. Listen, what's going on in our life isn't fantastic or big, but it's life. These little flowers reminding us of all the good things that are going on in our journey. And in a certain sense, don't look for big. The little things are the most important things in many ways. I love these 4 words. As a result of entering and consenting to God's presence and action in our lives, you may experience, in a certain sense in your life, a greater appreciation for silence, making space for it. More comfort with the idea of solitude, of being alone. My goodness, this pandemic has really helped us see what it is to have solitude in our life, and I hope you embraced it during these times. Solidarity, even during these times. Greater solidarity with our brothers and sisters in this world, in whatever way you're seeing it or experiencing it. We're one in all of this. There's no them and us. It's we. And the last is blocked out. On mine is service. That in a very special way, the more we give, the more, in a certain sense, that we seem to receive in our lives. Now, I'm not guaranteeing any of this, but those who have been practicing for a long time will see a manifestation of comfort with silence, solitude, solidarity, and service. And the other word, too, that could be very meaningful is a greater sense of simplicity in one's life. Practical ways to deepen our relationship with God. 2 periods of centering prayer a day for 20 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes. Now, I know this is kind of like many times a difficulty, but LJ mentioned the fact actually of how important it was to become part of one's life. And Father Thomas would like to say about the first 20 minutes, I think, is that once to get in touch, to kind of like set the foundation, and the 20 minutes later on in the day was to kind of like recoup your strength after going through a morning and afternoon that might be difficult in one's life. Now, Father Basil Pennington, one of the founders of Centering Prayer, used to always say, Carl, I wrote a book with him. Carl, he said, tell him to commit to 30 days. Commit to 30 days. And if this is a renewal for you, commit again to 30 days of twice a day doing 20 minutes of centering prayer. And see what happens in your life, and to be open more to God, consenting to God and action in your life, no matter what it might be. So fidelity is so important. Fidelity to the prayer is so important. It helps your motivations to continue each day and keep your motivations clear when it might be bogged down with the news of the day. It helps to focus. What is it all about? It's all about God as the center of my life and consenting to God's presence and action in my life. And it brings richness to all your other religious celebrations and devotions that you may have. It doesn't take the place of all of them, but it brings it to a different level of awareness, which is very, very beautiful. So the practice is important. Practice is important. Attend the continuing sessions, which Ellen has mentioned, and you'll be receiving materials on that. Join a centering prayer group if you're not already a member of that centering prayer group. Listen to the Word of God more each day, reading scriptures or Lectio Divina, and above all, study with the open mind, open heart of Father Thomas Keating. It is really, really, in a certain sense, the Bible really of centering prayer. Now, this is a to-do list. I always feel uncomfortable with these to-do lists. Do this, do this, do that, do that. But it's important to latch on to something or other to kind of like help you day by day remember that you wish to consent to God's presence in action in your life, and that you realize just how important this is. We began with these words. We're going to end with these words. Be still and know that I am God. And I like to pray this prayer this way. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am. Be still and know. Be still. Be. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am. Be still and know. Be still. Be. And if I may add to that, I came upon a wonderful prayer. Let your God love you. I don't know if you ever heard that prayer. Edwina Gately. You can go to Google and find it. Let your God love you. Please see how this little prayer builds on to be still and know that I am God. It's really a little poem. Let your God love you. Be silent. Be still. Alone. Empty before your God. Say nothing. Ask nothing. Be silent. Be still. Let your God look upon you. That is all. He knows. He understands. He loves you with an enormous love. He only wants to look upon you with his love. Quiet, still, be. Let your God love you. Let your God love you. Amen.
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 I see we have some further questions. I have a question here that's really theological, and I think it's too much to go into. But it's a good question. I would only say to the person about original sin, I would just say it is the human condition. It is the human condition, and as David Munskens, who was picture was in the beginning, sitting in meditation. a Dutch Reformed minister used to say, and it's the blood of Christ that has made it okay. But that's a simple answer. Please forgive me for not going into it more deeply. Did Thomas Keating's father ever come around and become proud of his father, of his son? Yes. Yes, in this sense that after his father's death, it dawned on Thomas how much his father loved him by gesture, not by words. That's what I recall. And yes, they made the peace was made after his dad's death with Thomas's realization and taking a second look at his pop. Isn't that so common with many of us that after a person's death, we realize that they loved us in their own way and how we missed it. We missed the signs and the indications of that. And that's why I don't believe death ends anything, to be honest with you. It just continues, and even our relationship with a person continues in a special way. Okay, Walter says, remind everyone that there is a Centering Prayer app available from Contemplative Outreach. It is helpful and I am grateful. Yes, it's a wonderful app. So it's for free too, and it'll help you in your Centering Prayer timing and everything else, and has all the wonderful news that's going on in Contemplative Outreach and resources that are there. So make sure you have it. Make sure you have it. It makes a big difference. Thank you.
I know that I'm speaking on behalf of everyone here, Father Carl, that we are just so honored to have had you be with us this time for your 45 years of Centering Prayer experience, your wisdom, your humor, your delight. We are delighted, and thank you for being with us, coming to us originally from New Jersey and now from Florida. And we also thank LJ, who's out there playing with the children and not back with us, but we will let him know too that we so appreciate his participation today.
Right.
We want to thank Martha for her managing of this entire meeting, as it's called today, the host extraordinaire. And we finalize this then with a prayer with Father Carl.
Thank you. Let us pray. This is the prayer that I shared with my father in his dying and with Thomas in his dying process. And I was surprised that he had the monks pray it every day until his death. Prayer of abandonment. I abandon myself into your hands. Do with me what you will. Whatever you may do, I thank you. I am ready for all. I accept all. Let only your will be done in me and all your creatures. I wish no more than this, O Lord. Into your hands I commend my soul. I offer it to you with all the love of my heart. For I love you, Lord, and so need to give myself. Surrender myself into your hands without reserve and with confidence, for you are my Father. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. God bless you all. It was a privilege to be with you. This is the first time I've done a Zoom conference, and it's quite an experience. And I want to thank Martha and LJ. I mean, this was, talk about a leap of faith. This was a leap of faith and trust, and I'm happy to have been part of it. And God bless you. Let's see how many. How many folks we got? Well, 65 still here. God bless you for being here. Have a good day. Cause a little trouble in the name of the Lord, okay? Bye now.